stuntman.
Remember what a fight...
Do you remember the first time that F-14 Tomcat roared across the screen, and you felt it in your chest? Not just heard it, felt it. That low, bone-rattling rumble that made the theater seats vibrate and turned every person in that building into someone who briefly considered a career in naval aviation. That was Top Gun. Released on May 16, 1986, directed by Tony Scott, and produced by the unstoppable duo of Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. The film became the highest-grossing movie of the year, raking in over $360 million worldwide on a budget of roughly $15 million, according to box office records. Tom Cruise played Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell, a hotshot pilot running on confidence and instinct. Anthony Edwards was Goose, the kind of best friend you root for the moment you meet him. Val Kilmer was Iceman, all jaw and competition and menace. And Kelly McGillis was Charlie, the civilian instructor who somehow made astrophysics look like a pickup line. Together, they made one of the defining films of a decade. A movie so culturally embedded that it was selected for preservation by the United States Library of Congress in 2015, deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That's not a small thing. That's the same institution that has preserved some of the most important films in American history. Top Gun earned that shelf space. But how it got there? That's the story most people have never fully heard. We're going in deep today, behind the cameras, past the PR gloss, and into the cockpit of how this movie actually got made. Here are 15 facts about Top Gun that go beyond the legend. Before we get to the movie, let's talk about the institution it immortalized. The real United States Navy Fighter Weapons School, nicknamed Top Gun, wasn't created out of confidence. It was created out of crisis. During the Vietnam War, from 1965 to 1968, the U.S. Navy ran Operation Rolling Thunder, a massive bombing campaign over North Vietnam. The results in the air were alarming. American pilots, who had been trained to rely on long-range missiles and a technology-first doctrine, were suddenly in close-quarters dogfights with nimble Soviet-built MiGs flown by North Vietnamese pilots who had studied their opponents carefully. The Navy's air-to-air kill ratio, which had been 12-1 during the Korean War, had dropped to just 3.7-1 by 1968. According to historical records compiled by the War History Online and corroborated by the Naval Aviation Warfighting Development Center. In plain language, American pilots were dying at a rate the Navy could not explain away. An investigation led by Captain Frank Alt, known as the Alt Report, diagnosed the problem. Pilots had lost their dogfighting skills. They were overtrained in missile technology and undertrained in the kind of close-range, high-speed aerial combat the enemy was forcing on them. The Navy's response was the Fighter Weapons School, founded on March 3, 1969, at Naval Air Station Miramar in San Diego. The base the pilots themselves called Fightertown, USA. The school taught air combat maneuvering in an intense, accelerated format. And it worked. By the end of the Vietnam War, the kill ratio had climbed back up to 12-1. A school born from failure that reversed the tide of an air war. That's what Tony Scott's cameras rolled through when they arrived at Miramar in 1985. Not a glamorous backdrop, a crucible that had proven itself in real combat. Here's a detail that didn't make it into any promotional poster. Tom Cruise's character wasn't always named Pete. In early drafts of the screenplay, the character was called Evan Mitchell. The name Pete was ultimately chosen as a tribute to Pete Pettigrew, a real Top Gun instructor who served as a technical consultant on the film. That kind of deliberate nod to the real world of naval aviation was woven throughout the production. The Navy insisted on authenticity where it could be controlled, and the names, the call signs, the procedures, many of these reflected real consultation with actual aviators. Similarly, the character of Charlie, Kelly McGillis's role, went through significant transformation. In earlier drafts, she was described as far more of a conventional romantic interest without professional credibility. According to trivia compiled from production sources and the fast-rewind.com film database, it was Dawn Steele, then a senior executive at Paramount Pictures, who pushed back against that portrayal. She reportedly refused to approve the project unless Charlie was rewritten as a genuinely intelligent, credible professional, a civilian instructor with real expertise. Steele's intervention gave the film one of its most consequential creative decisions. Charlie's authority in the classroom is what makes her believable as both a love interest and a peer. Without that rewrite, the film's romantic arc would have collapsed under its own weight. The logistics of filming Top Gun were extraordinary. Tony Scott didn't want props or miniatures or early-era computer graphics. He wanted the real thing. Real jets, Real carriers, real pilots. The Navy obliged, and Paramount paid for that access at a rate that, by any standard, was staggering. According to a 1986 article in Time magazine cited in production records from Men's Journal, the studio paid approximately $7,600 per flight hour for real Navy pilots operating real aircraft. By the time principal photography wrapped, Paramount's total bill to the Pentagon had reached $1.8 million. Consider the context. The film's entire budget was between $13 and $15 million. That means roughly 12% of Top Gun's budget went directly to renting the United States military. The aircraft used included F-14 squadrons from VF, 51 Screaming Eagles, VF, 114 Aardvarks, and VF, 213 Black Lions. Carrier scenes were filmed aboard the USS Enterprise, and a specialized aerial camera pod, originally designed to film missile launches at high speed, was obtained from the Navy's Pacific Missile Test Center at NAS Point Mugu. According to an account shared in production documentation compiled at fast-rewind.com, the commanding officer at Point Mugu initially resisted lending the pod. It took an admiral in Washington calling directly to override his objection. The result of all that military cooperation was footage that has never been replicated using practical effects. When you watch the afterburner ignite on that catapult launch, the heat shimmer is real. The G-forces are real. The aircraft are flying actual tactical maneuvers over actual ocean. No production since has accessed that level of authentic military hardware for a narrative feature, and the cost structure of modern filmmaking makes it unlikely any will again. Here's the magic trick hiding in plain sight. Those intense, sweat-soaked close-up shots of Maverick and Goose reacting inside the cockpit during dogfights, the ones that feel like you're right there in the aircraft, were almost entirely not filmed inside actual F-14s. The reason was simple and frustrating. The acoustic environment inside a fighter jet at speed made usable audio essentially impossible. Between engine roar and wind noise, whatever dialogue the actors delivered was completely lost. Tony Scott's solution was a purpose-built replica F-14 cockpit, mounted on a motorized gimbal platform, installed in a hangar behind Burbank Airport. The cockpit mock-up was built to meticulous detail. Production assistants stood just off camera spraying actors with water bottles to simulate sweat. A fog machine pumped atmospheric haze into the set. The gimbal pitched and rolled the cockpit to match the simulated maneuvers. According to accounts from production accountant records shared in the fast-rewind.com archive, the gimbal budget had always been planned, contrary to some later claims that it was a last-minute improvisation. Meanwhile, the exterior aerial footage, all of it, was completely real. Navy pilots flew the actual dogfight sequences. Cameras were mounted to a modified A-7 Intruder and a Learjet piloted by legendary aerial cinematographer Clay Lacy, who chased the F-14s and F-5s through actual high-speed maneuvers at altitude. The aerial sequences were filmed in Super 35mm format after it was discovered that standard anamorphic widescreen lenses physically broke apart under the G-forces involved. The motorcycle that tears down the runway as Maverick races the F-14 is a 1985 Kawasaki Z900R, the A2 model variant, to be precise. It wasn't just a visually interesting prop choice. The GPZ900R was, at the time, genuinely the most advanced street-legal production motorcycle on the planet. It was the world's first inline four-cylinder superbike with 16 valves and liquid cooling, and it was the first production motorcycle to crack a top speed of 150 miles per hour. When Maverick races that aircraft down the runway, the juxtaposition isn't just cinematic. It's the fastest road bike in existence against a multi-million-dollar military jet. Here's the detail that should be more famous. Tom Cruise had never ridden a motorcycle before filming. According to production accounts, he went to a dealership called House of Motorcycles in El Cajon, California, and learned the basics in the parking lot. By the time cameras rolled, he was riding helmetless at speed. The Kawasaki badges were, notably, absent from the tank in the film. According to Kawasaki's then marketing director Mike Vaughn, the production had originally requested 3 bikes for free in exchange for exposure. Kawasaki, having been burned by productions that never returned loaned vehicles, offered to sell them at dealer cost instead. When the producers threatened to go to Honda, Vaughn reportedly offered them Honda's phone number without flinching. The bikes eventually came through a San Diego dealer. The Kawasaki badges were stripped from the tanks, though the Ninja logo remained visible. None of that mattered. After Top Gun, the word ninja became shorthand for fast, and Kawasaki rode that association for decades. The volleyball scene nearly didn't survive Paramount's editorial instincts. Tony Scott had come to feature filmmaking from a background in high-end commercial directing, and he brought that visual language with him. The golden hour light, the careful staging of bodies in motion, the obsessive attention to how things looked rather than simply what they meant narratively. Production assistants drenched the actors in water and baby oil between takes, timing setups to capture the exact quality of late-afternoon California sunlight. Paramount executives were not charmed. According to production accounts, the studio pushed back hard, arguing the sequence was expensive, cinematically indulgent, and tonally inconsistent with a film that was supposed to be about fighter jets. They wanted it cut. Scott refused. His argument was less about artistic vision and more about commercial instinct. He believed audiences, particularly female audiences, who were not always front of mind in action film marketing, would respond powerfully to the sequence. He was right. The volleyball scene became one of the most talked about moments in the film, not despite its lack of plot relevance, but because of it. It was one of the only sequences where Maverick and Iceman face each other without rank, without aircraft, without institutional hierarchy, just raw competition in the sand. Kenny Loggins, playing with the boys, sealed it as a cultural artifact. What Paramount tried to cut became one of the frames most people reach for when they think about what Top Gun looked like. Top Gun's adversaries, the menacing MiG-28s that Maverick and Iceman chased through the sky, had a secret hiding in plain sight for anyone with an aviation background. In the political reality of 1985 to 1986, borrowing actual Soviet MiGs from Moscow for a Tom Cruise movie was not an option that existed. The production did what it could. They used Northrop F-5E Tiger IIs, American-made aircraft that the Navy already deployed in training exercises as aggressor planes simulating enemy aircraft. The F-5s were painted black and fitted with red star markings on the tail. They became MiG-28s in the film's universe. Aviation enthusiasts caught the designation immediately. Real Soviet MiGs have historically been assigned odd numbers: MiG-15, MiG-17, MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-29. By calling the enemy aircraft a MiG-28, the filmmakers invented a designation that any informed viewer would recognize as fictional. The script never named the enemy country explicitly. There's no flag, no nation identified, just the enemy, Soviet-adjacent red stars, and implied Cold War stakes. That strategic vagueness was deliberate. It allowed the film to be about competition and skill rather than a specific geopolitical conflict, and it helped the film avoid aging into dated propaganda. As a footnote, the F-5 Tiger IIs used in the film weren't even a Hollywood compromise. The real Top Gun school used F-5s painted as aggressor aircraft in actual training, meaning the enemy jets in the movie were the same planes the real pilots flew against in preparation for the actual threat. When Maverick studies silhouettes in the classroom, he's looking at the same aircraft Hollywood dressed up for the final dogfight. The inverted sequence, Maverick flipping his F-14 upside down and sliding in above a MiG-28 to photograph the pilot, is the most remembered aerial image in the film. It is also, according to people who actually fly these aircraft, physically impossible. The F-14 Tomcat has twin vertical stabilizers, large tail fins that would make canopy-to-canopy proximity at that distance geometrically impossible without both aircraft becoming wreckage. Fighter jets are also not engineered for sustained inverted flight. Beyond roughly 15 to 20 seconds, the fuel system begins to starve the engine. Experienced pilots also maintain staggered formation for a specific aerodynamic reason. The airflow between two aircraft at close range creates forces that can pull them together. Dave Baranek, a real Top Gun instructor who flew sequences for the production and later wrote about his experiences in the book Top Gun Days, confirmed that the inverted shot was a constructed illusion. According to his account, the F-5 pilots playing the MiG crew flew in formation alongside the camera-equipped Learjet piloted by Clay Lacy. On cue, they looked upward as if startled by something above them. There was nothing above them. The inverted F-14 was added later through optical compositing, one of the very few visual effect shots in the entire film. Tony Scott understood something fundamental about cinema in that moment. The image doesn't have to be real. It has to be believed. He needed a shot that communicated danger, audacity, and style in a single frame. He got one. The fact that the physics don't work has never once stopped anyone from loving it. The Take My Breath Away sequence, blue-lit, slow motion, thoroughly 80s in its visual language, wasn't in the original cut of the film. It was a patch job. Test screenings in New York and Los Angeles had gone well. Chicago, however, was a different story. Exhibitors came away saying the film needed more romance, that Maverick and Charlie's relationship felt underwritten, almost professional rather than personal. With principal photography long since completed, the filmmakers had a problem. Tom Cruise was already in Chicago shooting The Color of Money for Martin Scorsese. Kelly McGillis had moved on to another project and had dyed her hair dark brown. Tony Scott had to fly to Chicago and personally ask Scorsese if he could borrow his star for a single day. Scorsese agreed. The continuity challenges were substantial. To hide McGillis's changed hair, she wore a baseball cap in the elevator scene. Cruise appeared fresh from the shower, not for stylistic reasons, but because wetting his hair was the only way to flatten it enough to match his earlier footage. The love scene itself was shot almost entirely in silhouette, bathed in blue light, specifically to obscure the fact that McGillis was now a brunette. A continuity problem became an aesthetic choice. What should have been a visible seam in the production became, arguably, the most atmospherically distinctive visual moment in the film. It also won Berlin the Academy Award for Best Original Song and a Golden Globe, an award that, according to band member accounts, contributed significantly to internal tensions that broke the group apart within a year. This one is not a fun fact. It is an important one. Art Scholl was 53 years old, a U.S. National Aerobatic Champion, an air show veteran, and one of the most trusted aerial cameramen in Hollywood. His credits included The Right Stuff, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Blue Thunder, and The Great Waldo Pepper. When production needed impossible footage, Art Scholl was the person they called. On September 16, 1985, Scholl climbed into his Pitts S-2 biplane off the coast of Carlsbad, California. Cameras mounted to the aircraft to capture a flat spin, the deadly inverted spiral that would later be used to depict Maverick and Goose's crash on screen. He entered the spin intentionally at approximately 4,000 feet. Observers listening on the radio heard his voice at 3,000 feet. "I've got a problem here." At 1,500 feet, "I've really got a problem." Seconds later, the aircraft hit the Pacific Ocean. Only debris was recovered. Art Scholl's body was never found. The exact cause of the crash was never definitively determined. Some investigators speculated that camera equipment may have shifted the aircraft's balance. Others considered spatial disorientation or a control system failure. The Top Gun closing credits carry a dedication to his memory. It's a quiet text card, easy to miss if you're already leaving the theater. But it sits there as a reminder that the flat spin that terrified audiences, the sequence that made Goose's death feel real and visceral, was made real by a man who gave his life for that shot. Every time that scene plays, Art Scholl is in it.